Looking to play fantasy Csgo for the major playoffs? Go to eliteduels.com and draft 5 players from each tier to make your fantasy team. You earn points based off kills and assists, but lose points on deaths. Over $100,000 in prizes has already been won. Create your account and draft now. You can use the code JULES, that's DUELS, JULES, when you deposit and earn $5 free. Must be 18 years old or older. Welcome back to the podcast, ladies and gents. What a major we've had so far. It's been pretty incredible to see these upsets. And I guess to some people, these upsets may have been more predictable than to some others. It was really awesome to see how well Renegades clearly prepared for their game and how focused they were and the fact that they were able to deliver individually. And I think part of it was the fact that their game plan was so flawless and the way that they started. It was, I think, the perfect storm in that sense. And I think one of the ways in which ENCE would have been able to deal with that is if they would have done more preparation. Because I felt like they got caught by some stuff such as, all the play around mid and the mid boost and the ways that Renegades abused that. I think the analysts talked about that. That was abused a lot by Renegades, and it's something that if ENCE had done a lot of research on their games, then they probably could have prepared to deal with that a bit better, and the game may have looked different. However, it is what it is. Alexi B is out soon, and they're thinking about perhaps Sunny coming in, and that's going to change everything. They're going to build a team around him. He's going to be the star player. The roles are going to have to change. That's going to be a new era for ENCE. And, well, they're out of the tournament, but Renegades are through to the semis, and they're going to be facing a Vanguard. And it was incredible to see that a Vanguard delivered as well. Now, I mentioned in my preview that a Vanguard, for me, was a team that could definitely create an upset against Vitality, but I didn't expect Mirage to come up. And one of the reasons is because, well, we just don't really see almost any play from in officials, if you look at the statistics, from a Vanguard on Mirage, and they have a 33 win % on it or something. It's ridiculous. And Vitality have loads of games in the teens in number, and they have like an 85% win rate on Mirage. So it was shocking to see that it was such a landslide performance, and that my question was if the individuals could step up on the stage, because they've never been on a stage like that before. And they did. And it was incredible. And we got some great moments. And, well, Vitality are out. One of those two teams, Renegades and the Vanguard, could be in the finals. Insane. However, another thing that's insane is that the matchup we're going to get between those two teams, I think it's going to be ridiculous. I think it's going to be a great series of Counter-Strike. We saw a glimpse of those two teams playing earlier in the tournament. They played Vertigo against each other, and honestly, it was really exciting. It was very exciting to see how those teams adapted to each other on the fly and dealt with kind of the sneaky tricks that one another kind of specializes in. Renegades with that A ramp setup, and a Vanguard had really good movement around the map, and just generally, like, James is such a nuisance on that map with the AWP, finds really good ways to activate himself, and so I'm going to be really looking forward to that series. Now, on the other side of the bracket, we have tomorrow the quarterfinals playing out. Na'Vi versus NRG. Na'Vi really need to turn up. I know that they're having some internal issues as well. It seems like Zeus is going to be leaving. Hopefully, they don't have the same issue that ENCE had, and maybe a lack of preparation or whatever else it could have possibly been. But either way, this is the kind of stage where Simple tends to step up, and that's what they need. They need Simple to deliver, and if he does, it's going to be an absolutely awesome series. We know that NRG do struggle a little bit when it comes to getting really deep in tournaments, so hoping to see a difference there for them. They've looked so good so far. And then moving into the Liquid and Astralis, what a sick series that promises to be. Both teams looking to cement, both teams looking to prove something big. Liquid are looking to start an era by winning a major title, and that's what they're working for. Astralis are looking to gatekeep Liquid from that, and they're looking to rejuvenate their era. And so it's going to be crazy. Cannot wait. And speaking of that matchup, today's guest is going to be Elige from Team Liquid. Now, Elige is obviously an incredible player. He's been playing with Liquid and with Nitro actually for 5 years already. It's been a long time, and he's grown massively as a player across that time. I wanted to get into his mind on psychology and performance, and how he, what lessons he has learned moving, through his career so far, and what's been most impactful for him, like what Zeus did for the team, how Adren helps them, And we get into the nitty-gritty as well as to how he handles looking at the game in terms of his performance and what he does to be as consistent as possible, what he does to put himself in the flow state, and how he prepares for his matches. There's all sorts around those topics. It's really an interesting interview, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Hello, Elige. How's it going?
Going good.
Awesome. Thanks for sitting down and taking the time to do a podcast with me. I know you don't have much time at the majors, so I really appreciate that. And I had a lot of people telling me that you're the best guy to talk to from Team Liquid. So, what do you think about that? First of all, do you think there's any anyone's getting slept on in terms of people that can just dish out the knowledge or be really interesting in a podcast format?
I think that everybody on the team could be Stewie could be really good for a podcast. Nitro could be really good. Really everyone on the team could be really good. So
all the quarterfinals for the first day have been played out, so we can do a quick overview. So firstly, we just saw two big upsets. Renegades crushed ENCE, and then the Vanguard had an incredible series. They actually, first time at the playoffs on the stage, played really well individually and as a team, which is great to see. So what are your first impressions overall from the day one of the quarterfinals?
I think that the ENCE one isn't too out of nowhere, because I've always thought that Renegades has been a good team. They've kind of fallen off a little bit recently, but I actually was thinking about it the whole day. I was I can't remember a time where a team knowingly had a roster change coming and they did good afterwards. So I think that one's not too much of a random thing that happened. But the Vanguard one is pretty insane to people, and I would think that Vitality would probably not lose to Vanguard normally, but they came into this major playing pretty good, and it shows they've really improved recently, and they're having a hell of a tournament.
Yeah, it's really cool, because sometimes when you see a team, this is why the majors are so good and having these really big tournaments, they'll have a lot of potential, but you won't quite know, and they won't quite know how good they really are until they get to that stage and all the pressure's on, and all of a sudden, you get to reach a new peak. I feel like it's the same way as a commentator. You go to these events, and it helps to bring a lot out of you. And do you think that's kind of what's going on with the Vanguard, or do you think that's not actually that much of a big deal?
I actually think it's a different thing. I think right now in CS, I've been thinking this for a couple months, even while we were winning tournaments. I think that a lot of the teams' skill floor has risen, and the skill ceiling has kind of stayed the same. So you're seeing a lot of teams playing basically pretty high levels of CS. We've been saying it a lot of times, where the competition is the greatest that it's ever been. But that's normal for any sport. It's going to get better as the years go on. But I actually do think that we are capped in this sense, because CS is a lot about reactions and having proper protocols. And when the map pool has stayed really pretty much the same for its whole entire duration, and players are getting smarter, there's more information. Top players are really willing to talk about their protocols or what they're doing or what they think about the game. There's so many things that you can do to know what the right answer is. And a lot about CS right now is actually just trying to catch people off guard from doing the wrong play. So I think that there's been a lot of normalization of competition, and that's why I actually don't think any upset is really too much of an upset anymore, because I think the level of competition has just risen so much, but not because everyone is really insane. I think it's because of maps staying the same too long, and everyone has the same protocols, and they knew too much about what the right play is and how they should be playing.
So in that sense, do you think that in some respects Counter-Strike is becoming slightly diluted because of the map pool? And what I mean by diluted, I sort of mean that, as you say, it starts to be a bit blurrier, the line between how good this team is versus this team. And if X amount of time, just over time, that gap will just always get closer and closer. And then as far as the competitive aspect goes, and having to find edges and so on and so forth, do you think that in that sense the competition gets diluted, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, I completely think that's what it is. To your point of finding edges, there's only so many edges there are in these maps. We're seeing it really clearly with Mirage, and there's been a lot of complaints recently about Mirage. But I think about it for a couple different maps as well, because Mirage has been in the pool for so long, and there's only so much. We've actually done everything that there is to do on Mirage, and I feel like it's getting that type of way on a lot of maps, because there just hasn't been that much change. and you can't really find like too many edges, and you're watching like these best players like see like what the correct protocol is. I mean, sure, there's like little things that get improved like here and there, and those little changes in the end are going to be like what gets you the kill, and sometimes what's going to win the round, what strategy is going to win the round. But overall, they're not that big of differences. And if you only have like very small differences like here and there, like if some guy's just like on his game and like hitting his shots that day, like that's going to do better than you having these little differences. Like there's no like big differences in strategy. Like I don't think that we're going to see like a big revolution of strategy like we have in the past. Like when SK became the best team in the world, they had like this style that was really unique where they blended in all these different styles of CS, and it was like playing really perfect CS. Before that we had Fnatic when they were doing like all the really scrimmy stuff, like that was like their style. Astralis, like I feel like the SK and Astralis, I think if you compare like those two teams, you'll see like a lot of similarities in like how they function and how they played. And I feel like we're going to be seeing like a lot more of these types of like upsets happening for that reason.
Do we need to change the ecosystem in some way? Like what do you think would be the solution? Is it just getting more maps in? How would that work and so on?
I think that the number of maps that we have is fine, but I just think that they should be rotated out a little bit more frequently. I came from StarCraft, and there was a thing that was the Team Liquid map contest, which basically there was like a tournament that invited like a lot of pros that played it, and the community could see like how good these maps are, and they could vote on it. Like something that would be similar to that, like having like a community-driven map making tournament to try to support that scene and get the best type of maps that we could possibly have. I think that type of thing would be really beneficial for the scene. The only thing that is not good for that is in StarCraft 2, Blizzard started like supporting that, and in this case, Valve would have to start doing that because in the end, we do whatever Valve does for the map pool. I mean, we could have it so tournaments just don't really care about that too much, but I don't know like what the entire scene would think. But I do think that there needs to be some type of map rotation more. I think just changing one map out every major is fine because it's every 6 months.
It does feel like there are certain issues as well in terms of with the maps, because a map in Counter-Strike, it's like a game of Counter-Strike, one map of Counter-Strike, it requires so much in terms of the amount of practice that you have to do in understanding what are all the best angles. I do feel like these days, actually, people are much better in terms of understanding the fundamentals behind that. Like specifically, like, a Counter-Strike professional can look at a bomb site and just know which are the better angles based on like distances of certain things and like shadows and all the rest of it. But at the same time, there's going to be one ways and like all these like kind of gimmicks that might win a best of one or help you win a very important best of three in a tournament, but that's only going to work that time. We kind of saw this actually with Big to a certain extent when Big were kind of abusing what was it like that like crouch jumping or something like that, and so gimmicks like that would be a problem. So you'd need the amount of play testing presumably, or we would need Valve to work with us in a better way and in some way allow us to understand like what is how just allow us to understand what a one-way smoke is going to occur or not. Because right now, I don't think we can really reliably know, because I don't know if we have any way to predict the way the smoke mechanic's going to work. So that's another issue. So how many like maps would you be able to actually put in there? And also another thing in StarCraft, in the Brood War, that was how they balanced the game effectively. And there was a professional team of map makers just churning out maps for the professional scene, and those were like, I don't know if they were ex-professional players, but obviously they really understood all the mechanics in the game, and it's much simpler as well in many respects. So it feels like such a big task, honestly, to make that shift. Like so many pieces would have to change to allow us to have maps coming into the pool. And I mean, do you get frustrated with Valve in terms of because it is your career after all, and there are certain things that aren't going to be fixed or addressed, and so on and so forth. Like, what are the things that you would most like to see them do in terms of interfacing with the professional scene to make the professional game better?
I mean, there'd be a lot of things, but there's no. I don't know. It's really tough because I don't think that they ever do really want to get involved ever. So, in my opinion, I don't really think that we should just like copy whatever the majors do. I think that if we had like the biggest tournaments, the biggest leagues, start developing their own map pool and show that we're competent. Like if, let's just say for example, ESL like hired 2 or 3 map makers, and they just started developing maps where they had like 2 different maps instead of like the standard map pool that we had, and they just forced that into like some type of tournament or league, or I mean, it is a little different from StarCraft because in StarCraft, you don't need to like have a really in-depth knowledge of the map to be able to play it. Like you'll start like learning like the little intricacies of it as you keep playing, but it's not going to be like the defining factor of how well you can play the map. Whereas in CS, you need to have smokes, you need to have setups, you need to know flashes, you need to know like what type of setups. Like on Vertigo, when we started first looking at it, we weren't really sure like how many people should be here, how many people should be there. Like when you start off the map, so it is like a little bit difficult in that regard, but. Sometimes at some point we need to take a leap of faith. We can't just like keep how it is forever. And I don't think just randomly one major, we're just gonna have some random map that we're not sure if it's good or not. Like I think that there does need to be some type of leap of faith within the community where tournament organizers just take that leap themselves. Either hire like a map maker, 2 map makers, start like working on a map, 2 maps, and just change it out in the pool, maybe just once or twice, like a season. And I think that if it has success, I don't think Valve would look at that and be like, we're not interested in that. I think that they would be very reasonable, and I think they are very reasonable. Like just from talking to them, they want to know like every little intricacy of why you think what you think. So I don't think that it would be like too much of a problem. We just need to show that we're competent and that we are willing to do it.
Yeah, it is. I think as you say, like I think you said that you don't think that they really want to get that involved, and that might not change. And that is a really interesting one because obviously that would change everything because it's kind of the hard limit in a sense because they own the intellectual property. It's not like a traditional sport where like no one owns football per se. So it feels like there is a weird limitation there. So I wonder what would be the change because eventually, because Counter-Strike I don't think is going anywhere. I think it's just going to continue growing. So I'm wondering what will be the trigger for that, the tipping point to either have them just say, okay, you know what, we're not going to do the majors anymore, or like we're not going to sponsor it in the same way. But we're also going to relax certain limitations that we have, with regards to whatever it might be. And obviously, you see ESL right now going to move into. I think it makes sense that moving into a circuit. Is that something that you guys are happy to hear? The way ESL are doing their new system with DreamHack, with the Pro League.
I think that any type of circuit is good. I think that like CS needs something where at certain times of the year, people know like what to watch, what is the most important thing to watch at this certain time. Because if you're just a casual viewer, like you don't follow CS too hardcore, it's very hard to know what's going on. Like if I want to explain to my mom, like I don't know how like I would ever even explain. It's like, yeah, you go to this site and then sometimes there's going to be a tournament some weeks and sometimes there's not. I don't know which one's the best one. I mean, you can have an argument for what is the most important tournament. So it's just like really tough for the casual viewer, and I think that the casual viewer is obviously the largest amount of viewers that we're going to have, and we need to cater to the casual viewer, and I think that having a type of circuit event is good.
Do you feel like with the current ecosystem being as it is, obviously we've had lots of issues with regards to having so much travel, and of course that does impact not just performance but just quality of life overall. Is this something that you think is have you guys do you handle that okay, or would you like to see a significant change?
It's really tough. I think it's the hardest part about being a professional CSGO player right now. The game isn't the hardest thing. Like, I mean, obviously it's really hard, but like just like the thing like about life, like I don't think that playing CS is the hardest part of my life. I think that just like the mental strains of traveling so much and being away from family, being away from your own things is just really tough. So we've actually like looked at like how many days we've traveled, and last year we went to 17 tournaments, and that equaled about 262 days of travel out of the year.
Ouch, yeah.
And this year we said that we were going to be doing less travel, but just with how like the circuits have happened and the tournaments that we've needed to go to, the Grand Slam, things like that, it didn't work out that way, and we're going to be going to 19 tournaments, and about 19, 20 tournaments, and that's going to average out to about 280 some days.
Wow, yeah.
And it's really tough. Like it really is tough. It's tough just adjusting to new time zones constantly, not having a consistent like food plan. Like it's just like really hard knowing like what you're going to be eating today or tomorrow, like especially like in places where like the food places close early, so you have to adjust your whole schedule. It's just like a huge like quality of life thing that's really tough, and I would really like to see a significant change. Yeah,
so that's the food thing is obviously is actually so huge. I mean, if you're someone that doesn't travel all the time, you might not actually think about the impacts of this but having food that not only is somewhat consistent, because obviously if you travel, imagine being in holiday mode all the time, like you're going to gain loads of weight, and generally that lack of consistency, I think especially for performance, I think like having the ability to have habits is so important. I think food is a really big part of that too. And I've been considering, actually, it was really annoying because after the first week I was thinking about this, like, God, it's so difficult, and I'm here for so long. And it only occurred to me after a week, I should have asked for an Airbnb, which I think would have been fine. Is that something you guys would consider? So you can have your own kitchen and everything. You can actually even get a chef, and I would imagine that that's something that you guys would be able to do if it's like a particularly long tournament or stay.
We've actually never considered that. I think that it would be hard actually for tournament organizers to be able to set that up for 16 teams. If it's a 16-team tournament, to have an Airbnb for every single team that is meeting the same types of quality of life standards. So I actually think that would be really tough for tournament organizers to do.
But could Liquid just for you guys, just say, hey, Starladder, you know what? For this major, you don't have to, like, we're going to sort out an Airbnb situation. Is that something that would make sense or work in any way?
That actually, I mean, it does sound really interesting. I think that it could be a solution, but I mean, it's just like trying to put like a Band-Aid over like a gaping wound, you know. Like, it's just like a little thing that could help, but I think in the end, like if you just like reduce the amount of tournaments or travel days, it would be a big help.
So what's the biggest like change that's helped your quality of life whilst you've been traveling that you guys have made, or individually?
Actually, the biggest quality of life change that we've had since the beginning of this year is Liquid has started giving us like our own rooms. So like whatever the tournament organizer gives us, usually 4 rooms for it would be 7 people. Now everyone has their own rooms, and it's been a huge quality of life for us just to be able to go into your own room, and you don't have to worry about like listening to music too loud, or when you're going to go to sleep, or if you have to wake up in the middle of the night, you're going to wake up the guy next to you. So it's been a big difference, and I've been loving it.
So I'm glad that you guys have that. That's I can imagine that's relieving to have your own space, get to decompress and so on and so forth. But you mentioned StarCraft earlier, and so what was the depth of your foray into StarCraft?
I started playing ever since the game came out. I just like started watching all like the pro games on YouTube, and I started just getting into it. I never like played like too much because I was one of those guys that had like ladder anxiety, where I didn't like to play because I didn't want to lose. So I did play like a decent amount, but I really liked watching and like studying people, like how they played, what's the best build, stuff like that. I was never like pro level, but I was playing as good as I can. I mean, everyone's a semi-pro. I love like when I see just like semi-pro like in someone's description.
Yeah.
So I hate like saying that, but I was like just GM level, I would say. I was just a StarCraft player. Yeah,
no, I mean, well, that's the thing. Like I played quite a lot of StarCraft, and I've had experience playing like a lot like other RTS games as well. And for me, like when I got to top of Masters in StarCraft 2, it was just like it felt like this hard cap between that and GM. Like the amount of time investment I'd have to then shove in seemed like I couldn't really get behind that. It's such an intense game when it comes to keeping on top of everything and the amount of hours you need to put into it. So definitely much respect that you were able to achieve that. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, it's basically top 200 in your region back then. So that was very impressive. But speaking of going from StarCraft to Counter-Strike, and obviously you learned a lot about playing competitively when you're playing StarCraft. Obviously, it's not an FPS game, but presumably there's some lessons that you carried across. What would those be, do you think?
I think that StarCraft 2 really taught me a lot, where just even in my life, I tried to just do everything the most efficient way possible. So in StarCraft, you have something called build orders, which is basically the most efficient way that you could be getting to some point of tech or some type of unit. So I started like trying to do like everything as most efficiently as possible, which ends up developing into like a habit of schedule and stuff like that. Or like even when I'm like microwaving some food or something, I just like know how much time it's going to be, and I just like think of the things I could do in that time. So just an overall level of efficiency that I tried to apply to my life in general, and learning how to get better, because StarCraft 2 is a 1v1 game, right? So there's only you. If you're playing like a team game, or you've only ever played team games, you could be the type of person that as soon as you lose, you're just like, I hate that guy. Like, why'd he do that build? Why'd he do that against me?
I remember that,
my teammates. Like,
yeah.
it could be just like anything if you're playing a team game. Like, but if you're just playing a 1v1 game, like there's only you to to blame. Like if you lose, it's your fault. Like you could blame the other guy if you want, but you're not going to get past whatever level you are if you keep blaming that guy. You're always going to lose to that certain thing.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really helped me just learn how to learn, and that's been the biggest skill that I've ever had in my life.
I really like that point actually, because I was having this conversation a couple of days ago, because I also played like a lot of Quake 1v1. That was my background, and I was trying to explain, because these days we don't really have 1v1 games anymore in esports, which kind of is very sad, and at least none that have the spotlight on them like Counter-Strike does, and the experience of pressure when it's just you is so different. I played team games as well at a high level, and there was no comparison. I never really felt pressure in team games because you just focus on your job. You feel like a cog in the machine, as opposed to, as you said, all the you make a mistake and everyone's watching you make the mistake, and only you can fix it. And that's like such a different feeling. Do you feel like did you ever have any issues with pressure in general? And what did you do to fix those things? How do you feel about pressure in Counter-Strike?
In StarCraft 2, when I was playing, I actually think that pressure was like one of like the biggest things for me in terms of like ladder anxiety. Not even like when I got into the game, it's fine, but just like the pressure of like me just playing and it's like only me and there's no one to talk to, like that type of environment was just really tough. In terms of CS, I don't really feel like that I ever like had too much pressure. I don't think that it's ever been like a really defining factor on me. I'm not sure why, but I just never like really like focused like too much on people just like watching how I play or seeing my mistakes or anything like that. I've always just tried to like focus on me, and I think that maybe that's just like helped from StarCraft because I'm just used to how that has felt.
Is it something whereby you don't really check anything external in terms of, let's say, like Reddit and HLTV? Well, I hope to God that you don't look at the forums, but because obviously some people are a bit more receptive. They kind of need to kind of check stuff and look and see what people are thinking and saying and everything. And so for those people, then that is an additional pressure that they might be putting on themselves. Is that always been something that you just never really cared about it? You just focus on your own game, or?
When I first started Csgo, when I first started being a pro and like started having games and people started liking me, people started hating me, I had to start learning that I can't have everyone like me. And that took me like 2 or 3 years for me to finally realize that I can't please everybody and not everyone's gonna like me, and that's just how it is. I never really have been like the type of person to just be able to shut something out. So if I read something, I can't just like go back to not reading it. So in the end, for me, I just had to get stronger and thicker skin and realize that it doesn't really matter. Like that's just like the things that I tell myself. Like I can't make everyone like me. So nowadays, like if I see some comment of someone like being mean or saying something to me, I'm just like, whatever, either he doesn't know or he's just being mean to be mean, and that's just how people are.
Right. And did you ever have any mentors that you could speak to? I mean, Zeus kind of looked like he was actually kind of a mentor. I mean, he's a coach. I guess it's kind of is kind of the same sort of thing going on there. But I mean, if you could speak to Zeus, but also was there anybody else that kind of helped to mentor like good habits and behaviors for you as you were coming up as a player?
The two main people I would say like that have helped me mentally throughout my career has definitely been Zeus and our sports psychologist Jared Tendler. They've both like had such a tremendous impact on me, and ever since I started taking it more seriously with our sports psychologist in the past 2 years, and Zeus specifically, I think it's been a huge difference on me as a person and as a player.
Did you come across things that you were just really not aware about when it comes to yourself? Like you just lacked some self-awareness on something specific that they were able to help you with, or what were some of the big things that they helped you with?
I'd say for our sports psychologist, I started just like working a little bit more in depth with him, and he started getting like to the really deep roots of like the problems. So our sports psychologist, like when people think of a sports psychologist, they could think of someone that's going to just like tell you just random things like picture yourself winning, picture yourself holding the trophy, stuff like that. And I would never be a person that's receptive to that because that stuff just doesn't make sense to me. But he's the type of guy where he just looks at the exact root of the issue. So if I get mad at something, he looks at for the exact reason why I get mad. Or if I don't like how someone said something, then it's like, why don't you like how he said that or something? Just like the way that I communicate with my team, how I think about myself. I think that those points are like the main things that they've helped me work on.
So how do you think about yourself, and how has that changed?
Geez, I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a pretty fascinating question. I think because I think for many people, you can create all these kind of inner narratives, and if you don't live up to them, there can be kind of a dissonance. But you can also sabotage yourself if like for example, if you are you just don't think that, I'm just not a star player, or I'm not just not as good. I mean, that's the thing. Like when you go into the server, right, you have to think I am the best, kind of in that vacuum of that game. Like you have to think I am the best Counter-Strike player, in fact, more or less. And you can let me know if you agree or not with this. And that's kind of part of kind of the killer instinct. Because as soon as you let the narrative run that, I'm playing against Saiwu. Zara's really, really good. I'm playing it simple. He's the best player in the world. If you start thinking about those things, you're thinking about things from the wrong perspective completely, and that's going to be you'll be self-sabotaging and so on. But at the same time, it can also go the other way, where you can think too much of yourself in a way that's not realistic, and then if you don't match up to that expectation, then you start putting this pressure on yourself. So it can go in so many different ways, which is why I asked that question. And everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think that a lot of players, like even when I'm playing pugs or I'm playing like another game and there's like a pro in my game, whenever I hear someone say, oh my God, is that whoever, like this player, I just know that I'm instantly going to lose. Like whoever's on my team that said that, if they said that, I'm definitely going to lose.
Right, yeah.
Because as soon as you start thinking about who you're playing and like why that has some type of significance, you're just going to put yourself at a disadvantage. And I mean, you're going to hear that CS is like such a mental game, and it is to like it really is. But just to an extent where if you let things get in your head and you lose confidence in your abilities for something, that is going to make you be so much worse of a player, and you're going to make these bad decisions that you shouldn't be making. And that's one of like the big things that like our sports psychologist went over with us, where it's just like the level of competence you are with something. So let's just say that you're having like a really normal day. That would be like your B game that you're having. And on your B game, like you're not playing like as good as like you could, like you're not playing like your God mode, but you're also not playing your worst. And your C game obviously would be your worst, A game best. And he's really helped us like develop like both sides of our game. So for me, I think that like as a player, my C game is really, really strong. So that means if I'm having like a bad day or I'm sick or maybe something like personal happened to me, that it's not going to be affecting my game. Like I'm not going to be like taking a peek that I shouldn't, or I'm not going to be like saying something to my teammate that I shouldn't, that affects them in like a negative way. And like I think that those things, like working on both parts of your game, is something that a lot of players overlook, because yeah, sure, you want to be like trying to get like really highlight players or getting like 4Ks, working on your aim all the time, but you also need to be working on like the back part of your game. So when you are messing up these things, you need to find out why are you messing up these things. And the reason for why you're messing these up, like if anything bad is happening, it's because you don't know them as well as you think you do. So you really need to have a really hard focus on those days where you're not playing as good, because they're actually really important. So some players will take days off, or like if they're having like 1 or 2 bad pugs and they'll just take a break. I think that's a really bad way to look at it. When you're having those bad days, those are the exact days you want to focus on, because you're having like an in-depth look at the worst parts of your game.
It's part of you, right? Yeah.
Like you are getting like a front eye bird's view of how you are at your worst, and you can finally start focusing on those things that you don't know as well as you thought you do.
Yeah, I really like this idea, because it touches on something you were talking about previously with the 1v1 with StarCraft, how part of the ladder anxiety is that there is actually anxiety because you'll be faced with yourself. And it's a very clear display of, this is all the shit that's wrong with you right now. And sometimes we don't want to see that. It's difficult to accept that. So I really like the idea of accepting that me playing bad is not me not playing my best, and my expectation can't always be to play my best. And that's also interesting too, because I think people get an emotional kick, obviously, from playing their best game. A lot of people, that's why they play. They're chasing to play, like they're chasing those moments where they hit those amazing shots, and then they get into the flow state and they're feeling really good. And so when you're talking about working on different parts of your game, do you consciously recognize in your mind there's like a reference point whereby you say, okay, I whiff some shots here, like I'm not as, like I'm finding it a bit harder to kind of get into the zone, and then do you have some protocols and how you adjust how you'll play certain positions? Like do you play the less risky, or is there something that manifests specifically in the game as a response to you thinking, okay, I'm in my C game now?
So if I think that I'm in my C game, I'm going to be going to the most comfortable parts of my game. And this is why you have to have really strong fundamentals, and why the fundamentals And that means like just like the very basic building blocks of the game are the most important parts of CS. You can have like really strong like gimmicks or like these certain things that you're really good at, but if you're having like a bad day and you don't have really good fundamentals, like you don't have good habits for what you should be doing in what situation, you're not gonna be a complete player. And we see that a lot with players that are really streaky and like sometimes they're having really good games and other days they're just completely terrible. I think that's just a lack of fundamentals and you not working on the building blocks of your game enough. So if I'm having those types of games, I'm just going to be going into the things that I am extremely comfortable doing, things that I'm doing in practice every single day and that I know every single step. So I'm not going to be like, let's just say I'm on T side and I have like a strat that I like to do or we're defaulting a certain way and I'm having like my C game, I'm going to call something that I've called like a million times, or I'm going to ask someone to help me do something. I'm going to ask for like a certain flash, some play that I'm really comfortable doing to help me get back into it. And I think that ever since, I don't know, probably like last year or something like that, I've had a lot of games where I could start maybe like 2 or 3 kills for the whole first half. And to me, that it actually doesn't even affect me anymore, where I just like, oh, that's fine. I can just get like 3-4 Ks or something and I'm right back to where I should be. So I think that that is how I deal with playing at my C game.
This is so cool, because another reason I love this is because when we talk about this is a funny thing. Like a lot of people talk about the idea of confidence. Oh, it's a confidence game, and I think that it's not often expounded upon. People don't often quantify what that really means. And I think partially, again, you can correct me like in the ways that you view this question. For me, it's about the emotional relationship to the game effectively. And so in accepting all parts of your game and understanding how to deal with all parts of your game and having the awareness of like, okay, I understand my game to the degree where if this is happening, these are the kinds of ways that I respond to that. And like that's all worked out. So all of a sudden you kind of lift this expectation that you have to be like lights out in every single spot. And so I feel like that gives you much more very like safe feeling emotionally. And especially as you start to take control, because you're taking control over every part of your game, you start to just, I feel like it must be so relaxing and relieving to when you first began to look at everything like that. And that must make you just happier and just more, and when things do go badly, you must be able to take those situations in a much better way than otherwise. Do you feel like that's something that happened when you made this switch of thinking?
So one of like the first times that I started putting this concept to work was actually mentally, where I had to start looking at the mental side of my game, and I needed to start like looking at like the first signs of tilt, because for me that was like the biggest weakness of me as a player, probably in like 2017. So that was the first things I needed to address, and as soon as that I see me start to get tilted, that is like such a healthy sign. And I think a lot of players don't even see like when they're tilted, and by the time that they're tilted, they are so deep into it that they can't even get out of it. So for me, like I have these signs that I know like when it's happening. I know when I'm starting to get a little frustrated. And that's when I can first start like saying things to myself, like some type of logic, and telling myself, yeah, it's fine. Like I'll get back into it, or what he said, I mean, let it go. We'll talk about it later. I can just start like saying those things to myself as soon as I see the first signs of tilt. And then I can get back to my normal game, because if I let that affect me, it's going to start clouding my decision making. I'm going to start doing things that I don't normally do. I'm going to go into my C game, and then it's going to start affecting my game. So I think that's the first time that I started, implementing that into my game. But it was actually mentally first, and not actually tactically.
So that's like the whole tilt thing is like obviously very interesting, because this is actually one of the reasons why earlier I was saying, were you made aware of something that until that point you just lack the self-awareness to see, and that's kind of how like the mentors helped like lead you along the path to like generating the awareness, because that's such a big deal. I think as we get older as well, like you start to have more of a sensitivity for yourself, like even just simple things as to like how eating a certain food might make you feel. That just like these small there's like all these messages getting sent to your brain that you might not necessarily be kind of sensitive enough to be aware of, and be like, oh, well, that actually means something. So speaking of which, when you're talking about your awareness of your tilt, how do you, for you personally, obviously for any of you listening, it's different for everybody, but for you, what are the first signs of tilt? How do you know when you're entering this kind of mindset?
For me, the first step is actually like physical. I actually feel my head start getting hot, like physically hot, and I know that it's affecting me immediately. And I could start thinking that maybe that's going to start affecting my comms. Maybe I'll start like talking a little bit quieter. But normally, as soon as I feel myself like getting a little bit warmer, just like in my head, I know that I got affected by that mentally, and I need to take a step back and take a chill pill, or tell myself that we're going to deal with it later and stuff like that. That's the first step for me.
So when you're so that just works for you, or do you ever find that sometimes you're implementing these tools, do you find that sometimes that doesn't quite work and you have to take more extreme measures to kind of help calm yourself down? And do you have any other ways that you deal with that, or does that just normally work for you now these days?
Well, for me, I've worked on it so much because it's one of the things that I needed to most work on in 2017. And when I first started working on it, the first thing that Jared told me, who's our sports psychologist, he said that you need to have like the identifying factors of you starting to tilt. So for anyone that's listening, you need to actually like notice when you're going on tilt. You need to like write down like the signs, like this is what's happening. Like I'm either saying this certain thing, or maybe you're getting warm too. Whatever your sign is, you need to realize that first. And the first step is realizing that it's there. And the second one is you need to start having some type of formula to bring yourself back into it. And for me, that's just injecting logic. That's just me saying that either we're going to deal with this later, we'll talk about it after, I'll fix this play later, or maybe sometimes you're not getting tilted about something mentally, or something happened in the game. So let's just say that somebody did something that you weren't expecting, or he pushed like an idiot or something like that. That's about expectations, and you need to be expecting those types of things. And if you're not, like, you should be, because
expect shit to go wrong at all times.
Yeah, like if you're expecting to kill that guy if he does a certain thing, like if you smoke out something and he just runs through and kills you, I mean, that's the whole point of the smoke, right? Like, you're putting that down, so if he runs through it, you kill him. And you can't just have an expectation that he's never going to go through it, because if he does, he's going to kill you. You need to be ready for it. So if you're getting tilted at something like that, you just need to be able to tell yourself, like, it doesn't really make sense for you to be getting mad at that. And I think that having just a logical approach to that is beneficial.
So talking about the emotional aspect of the game, just from the way that I think about it is, it's very important to obviously be in flow state as much as possible. That's when we play the best Counter-Strike. That's when you become a god. That's what god mode is. And I've always felt like the easiest way to that is to have this ability that no matter what's happening, you're always able to be kind of having fun, actually executing everything that's within your game plan, and being able to be in a spot where nothing really knocks you. And even if stuff does happen and is a setback, it still doesn't mentally set you back, and you can be in that kind of creative, happy, playful state. Obviously, like for you guys, like you must all be chasing as much flow state as possible. So what is it that, do you feel like it comes down to that, or what have you worked on to try to get closer to experiencing as much flow state as possible?
There are a lot of individual things that each person is going to have that indicates their flow state. So, for example, some people can be really hype and they can start shouting, or they could be doing really aggressive things. Actually for us, one of our number one rules is to have fun, because when we're not having fun, we're not going to be winning. Like, if we're not joking around with each other and saying things that is going to make everyone laugh, we're not having fun, and we're probably not going to win. But it's also difficult because usually you're having fun when you're winning. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword there. Like, sometimes, or a catch-22. So at least for me personally, like being in like my A game, when I first started, maybe like 2015, 2016, even the early 2017, I thought that my best in the zone gameplay was when I was really calm. Like when I'm like just really chillax and just not really getting too hype over things. Like when I do something crazy, when my teammate does something crazy, I always thought just being relaxed was the best part of my game. But my teammates always told me that I always play better whenever I'm like talking more, or I'm starting to call strats, or if I'm starting to take over the game. And it took me a while to start implementing that and start doing that. But as soon as I did, I think that's what really like elevated me like as a player. So whenever I am like having like my best games, I am like taking the duels that I know that I'm going to win. Like, I'm going to be doing like really aggressive things. I always like thought of it like Fur. So I feel like Fur does really good. Like when he has been playing like for the past couple of years, he's always been like that super aggressive guy doing like these really aggressive plays. And I think that's how he gets into the zone for him. Because if it just works like 2 out of 3 times, like even if it doesn't work the first time, like if he gets like 2 or 3 kills the other times, like he's going to be like really feeling it. So for me, it's actually really similar. Like for when I'm doing like aggressive plays, they usually involve teamwork. And if I'm involving teamwork, I'm calming and I'm making up strats and I'm thinking of setups. So that is for me what is going to get me into the zone. I need to be like talking like as much as I possibly can, thinking of setups, thinking of what's going to be working, and taking the duels that I know are going to be working. I mean, sometimes it's really hard because if you're not having those types of games, it's like what I said before, like the catch-22. Like if you're not like feeling the game, or you're not like feeling that good, like you're not having a good read, so you're not able to like get into that zone because you're not having the reads that you should. So you're not able to like calm confidently the setups that you want or the strats that you want to do. So it is really difficult, but that's the things that I've noticed about my A game that I try to do every game.
Yeah, it's really interesting because because that, like what you're saying, like the whole chillax thing, I went through that as well. And I remember that, like, then it made me aware that more than ever, the biggest sticking point for me in my performances was actually focus. And it sounds like what you're talking about is there are certain things that you do that makes you super dialed in to the game, like extremely focused. And have you ever found any, like for me, it was like focus was always a huge problem, and I couldn't quite find the path when I was a player. Do you feel like you've pretty much gotten to a point where it's just about honing everything that you've already learned, or do you feel like there are some sticking points now that you're really working on, or any big areas that you think you could improve on right now?
For me, I don't know. Like, I think it would kind of like hone into what I was saying before about how everyone has like the same protocols and the same stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I have like anything like really glaring that I need to fix. Like, for me, it's always been about minimizing mistakes because I know that my A game has always been really strong. I've always had games where I can just go off and take charge, and fixing my C game and the back end of my game has always been like the number one priority for me. And I still think it is, like, just minimizing mistakes, because I think CS, like I said, like everything has in general been like 95% figured out. Maybe there's going to be like some things here and there that you can learn, or maybe a new protocol. But I think in general, most things have been figured out. So for me, I'm just always trying to make sure that I don't make those mistakes, even when I'm having like a bad day. So like if I'm sick or something, I try to make sure that I'm still adhering to the same protocols, because to me, that's showing that I have the right fundamentals that I should.
So what is the biggest sticking point that you commonly see from other pros?
I don't talk to like too many other pros like outside of my team, but just from like the outside looking in, I feel like a lot of people still don't have like some of the protocols that they should. Like even some of like the tier 2 or like lower tier 1 teams, they still don't have like the protocols for how to help somebody. Like when you are having problems in practice, I don't think that a lot of teams are like thinking, when this certain situation happens, how exactly should we deal with this certain situation? Like for me, I've had so many situations recently like that are really rare, but like when they happen, I need to know exactly what to do next time. And it's always really helpful when they happen in practice, because we always like to look at the games afterwards and like just go over the exact rounds, because we record our games. And when we can look at like the exact situation that happened in that game and just figure out a protocol for what we should be doing, like where should we be rotating, where should we be flashing, if we're in the situation like on Inferno, for example, if we have 2 guys playing in sight and then they're coming up lane, how exactly should people be supporting us? Like, how should the jungle guy be supporting? Where should he be throwing his flashes? Is he going to throw a flash that's going to blind us? When he throws that flash, am I confident that I don't have to turn away? If I turn away, maybe I'll die. So I think that those little things, like I said, like the fundamentals are the most important thing, and I don't think that people focus on them enough, because when they're going in practice, they're just looking at the big picture of how they lost their round, but they're not looking at the specific situation or the specific protocol that they think that would help them enough.
Everything is boiled down to the intuition. And so if you can ever help that with like protocols, for example, that is like so valuable. And it seems like that's a reason why teams also struggle to fix problems, because you have less of a consistent base to tweak and work from. And speaking of which, obviously we'll talk a bit more about Zeus, but I will quickly want to ask you about Adren, and because obviously 2 completely different coaches, but we don't really get as much of a look into Adren from the outside. What ways would you say that he helps the team, and what are his strengths?
I think that just keeping people on the same page just tactically is one of his like biggest strengths. So like, for example, if we like have a plan to do something, like let's just say that we call a timeout and we had like a plan that we wanted to do, but it wasn't like as in depth as it should have been. Like let's just say that we have like a strat that we want to do, but it was something that was like kind of on the fly. Like he'll just like call a timeout immediately and just be like, let's talk about exactly like who's doing what, just so everyone's on the same page. Because if you ever have to just like think about what is this guy going to be doing, or any of the like those split second thoughts that come up, that's just going to be hindering you, like you were saying before. Like it frees up your thought process. And you can see that with even 2015 Fnatic. Like I remember watching those when I was way worse, and I would just be watching those VODs and I'm just listening to how much they're talking, and it wasn't like actually too much. Like they weren't saying like as much as I thought that they should be saying. And I feel like that's because they had protocols, or maybe they didn't for back then. I don't know what they had, but
I don't think anyone knows.
just like looking at it, like I figured that they had protocols where it's just like unspoken chemistry, and people say that a lot, unspoken chemistry. And I think that in the end, that just means protocols that you have between you and your teammate. So Nitro and I have been like playing like as a teammate for a very long time, 5 years. So we know like how each other wants to play just in general. Like I basically know like what he's going to be wanting to do, what he knows what I'm going to want to do. And that honestly is just like protocols. Like he knows what I'm going to do, so I can start thinking, what's the other guy going to do? Like where's he going to be? And if he's here, then what am I going to do? Like stuff like that. It just like it just lets you go to the next step.
So, talking about Zeus, because I want to be also sensitive to your time. I think we have maybe like 10 to 20 minutes left, something in that region. And you can also cut me off whenever you need to go. But speaking about Zeus, it felt like, Zeus was there for a couple of years, and it really felt like, because I also did like a podcast with him, like a pretty long one. We talked about team culture for almost like an hour and a half, pretty much. And it was so refreshing to see how much Zeus really cared and understood, and how passionate he was about all of these principles. And I also feel like I get the sense that Zeus has this leader of men type quality to him. And that is also something that is, I think, sorely lacking in Counter-Strike in general. And so there's all these great qualities of Zeus. Like, what was he to you?
I mean, he was a leader, a friend. Like, he was just someone to look up to. He's helped me like through a lot of things like in life, just like helping me like just deal with things as a person, like as a player, like telling me like how it is, like what I need to hear. I think that he's just like always given me like a fair shot, like in everything that's ever happened with this team.
It must have been really hard to see him leave.
Yeah, I mean, it was really tough because Zeus like has always been like with the team. Like I never thought of like Liquid without Zeus, and it gets to that point like when you play with someone for so long, or you're coached under someone for so long, like they become like the identity of that team. So I mean, it was like really hard to like hear that he wanted to go, but it's just how it is.
Yeah. What is the biggest void since he left in terms of what he helped to offer for the team?
I mean, the really good thing about like how Zeus has been like as a coach is he's helped us like so much like as people and as players. Like the things that like were happening when he was our coach are completely different to like what's happening now. And like if Adren like had to deal with those same issues, I mean, we could have a completely different team right now if Zeus didn't have those issues like fixed. So I think that he had like a really good leadership quality to him. Like he's just a natural born leader. Like he's just like one of those guys. And like you were saying before in like the CS scene, like there's not really like too many of them. So he knows like how to talk to like certain people. Like I think that you can't just have like a one rule like fits all people. Like, you can't talk to like me the same way that you would to Stewie, or to the same way as Twiz. Like you got to cater like to the exact person, because they're going to take things differently. That's just like how we are as people. Like you need to like know that and be able to like talk to like your players like the right way for them to be the most receptive as possible, because in the end like we all want to improve, we all want to win as a team. So doing that the most effective way possible is what he was really good at. So with me, he was always like really blunt with everything. Like he always just like told me like what I needed to hear, because he knew that I can deal with it and I just need to hear it that way. So I don't think that we're missing like as much, because he's already like shaped us into like as good a people that he could like while he was on this team. So I think that he's done like a really good job. Like he's helped me like transform as a player and a person. And he said it actually a lot when he was on the team, that when he joined the team, like he wanted to not only make us better players but better people. And I think that he really did that. And if he didn't, I don't think that we'd be as successful as we are right now. Yeah,
again, like I think I know that he got a lot of credit, but I feel like he deserves even more credit than he got for what he was able to achieve on Team Liquid. I think looking back, because obviously the game is so young, if we look back at, and because these days as well, it's so hard to really know what a lot of coaches are doing, and it ranges so much team to team and individual to individual. But I think we're definitely gonna look back on his tenure with Liquid and really because the change in results was so apparent, and as you say, he clearly brought so much to the team. But speaking of which, you've been playing with this lineup for a while now, and with Stewie in the mix, and things are going really well. And how was it to integrate Stewie into the team? Because it really feels like such a natural fit now in the last few months for sure, obviously.
Well, when he came into the team, he basically went to the majority of Taco's roles because he was already really playing on MIBR, and that always helps a lot. We made changes here and there, for what would be helping us as a team. For on the T sides, he's generally with the pack, and that really helps his skill set because he's actually a natural born leader as well. He knows how things that should be going. If he sees someone not communicating something, he'll instantly start picking it up, or if he thinks that there's a strategy that's really obvious that we should be doing, he'll just take over even if he's dead. So he just has those natural leader qualities, and for someone like that, you want them to be in the center as much as you can, because they're going to be the one that's going to be helping the direction of the team, helping the flow. So I think that he's actually fit into the team really well, and I think that's something that was missing in the team for a while before he joined, was just another strong voice that would be helping when one voice isn't doing as well. So what a really strong team makes is if one guy is not having the strongest of days, someone else needs to be able to pick that up. And we've always seen that with skill, right? If you have 5 players that are really talented and one guy is not playing as well, then you hope that the other one picks it up, but you never think about that mentally. And let's just say that Nick is having a rough day and I'm having a rough day, then who picks it up? Then Jake would pick it up because he is really good at those leadership qualities, and vice versa. If Jake is having a bad day, then it's my responsibility and Nick's responsibility to help pick that up, and Twist's responsibility as well. It's everyone's responsibility to have to pick this up, and we've really had a focus on that ever since that he joined as well.
Okay, and with that, talking about how he's impacted the team and the kind of the roles he's fulfilled and his strengths and how that works. Before we kind of wrap up with a quick couple questions about the major, I want to ask you about this quality of chasing greatness versus being great, because I think we see, obviously for a young team that's never experienced the #1 podium at a major before, that's everything their life has been about. And then we've seen that, Kirby talked about this, and there's obviously been other instances where people, they have a lot of success, but then it's very different when you've had that success and then still being the best, still putting in the work that you were putting in before to chase, but putting that work in to reinvent and to just continually win. That is, so how do you view these ideas?
In terms of if we're already there, or what do you think?
Because right now, of course, you guys you've had the #1 title for a while. Obviously, this major you had the break. Obviously, everyone's having some issues with the break and coming back in and finding the form again. But that is something that you guys you're there now. You were chasing for a while, but now you've also experienced what it's like to definitely being the best in the world. So how do you handle all of this? How do you look at it?
I actually don't really think that we've even really experienced being the #1 for a while and need to keep grinding to keep it. I don't think that's really happened yet because of just how the tournament structure is went. We're just gone for 2 months, and we just won a lot of things in those 2 months. So I think that's really different from a time period of being the best for a year. I think that's really different than just winning a bunch of tournaments in a row. So when we came into after the break into our boot camp, we were immediately talking about our expectations, what we think is going to happen, just everything that we think about the major, and we all basically had the consensus that it's going to be a really tough major for the stuff that I said before. Everyone's a really good team. We all have the same stuff. Everyone's going to be studying us. They're going to be taking our stuff. They're going to know what we like to do. So we really focused on knowing that it's not going to be easy, and making sure that our expectations are really clear, I think is really important. Because if we went into it and we're just we're going to be the best, it's going to be easy, we're going to win everything, I think that we probably wouldn't even made it out of the groups. So when we did start losing the first 2 games, we won the first, I don't remember exactly how it went, but when we were down 1-2, we had to really focus. We had to completely do those changes and be guys, this is exactly what we said. We can't get down on ourselves. We knew it was going to be tough. We came into the boot camp knowing it was going to be tough. We left the boot camp, we talked about it, and we knew it was going to be a hard tournament. Like not only because like the level of skill for everybody's up there, but everyone had a lot of time to be able to study us. I don't think that we've like changed a lot of the things that we're doing too much. I think that just people know what we like to do, and our cohesion's not as good as it could have been. But in general, I think that we still have like that mindset of we need to grind to the top. Like I still think that we haven't really like been on the top for that long, and I think that we still want to be able to like show that we can do that.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. So very quickly, what do you do personally for yourself when you're going to go into a big match, an important game, to kind of get yourself in the mind state that's going to help you to get to your A game? Is there anything that you do to keep yourself focused or kind of hype yourself up?
The night before or the day of?
Both.
The night before, I really like to see what the other team does, just so I can get like a little bit of a picture of like their tendencies of what they like to do. Of course, in CS, it's really different from like how 2015 was, for example, where people would counter strat and they'd have like these really obvious tendencies. But I just like seeing like how like the flow of the game works for those certain teams. And right before the match, I don't really like focus on too much in particular. I just make sure that like I'm DMing, I'm making sure that like I'm doing my stretches, I'm doing like my whole routine. Like I have a routine that I like to do, and I like having it every single time. We make sure that we have a huddle before every game, make sure that we talk about what we're going to do, like our first gun round, like what we think is going to be happening, our pistol round, just making sure that people are on the same page and limiting like as much useless communication that we possibly can.
Awesome. Well, okay, last question. And I'm going to have to talk about the major. Again, I could have, honestly, just talk to you for a long time because there's so many awesome things to talk about. But, circling back to the major, you're going to be playing Astralis tomorrow in the quarterfinals, which is a crazy concept in of itself. But as you say, very difficult major, so not too surprising, all things considered. When you're facing Astralis, do you look at things any differently to any other team when you're preparing for them?
No, we don't really look at them like too differently anymore. Like last year, for example, we'd play them like another final and be like, oh man, it's like the same stuff. Like we know what they do. Like of course we studied them a lot. We know what their tendencies are. But I mean, it was just like the same type of like, oh, it's like Astralis, like it's gonna be tough. Like we don't know if we're gonna win. But ever since that we like bridged the gap this year, we really do just like look at them as any other team, and we want to keep proving that we're better than them. So we keep looking for like any little advantage that we can, making sure that we talk like when they do like this certain thing, like if they have like some certain gameplay aspect that they have, we want to make sure that we not only talk about that they do it, but have a response for it. Because I'm not sure how it is with other teams because I've always been with Liquid, but I know for us, sometimes we've just said what they're going to do, but we've never said what we're going to do about it.
You're right.
And that sounds like it would be really obvious, but I
yeah.
feel like it isn't. Like if you know that these guys like to play this certain setup, I mean, that is really great, but like if you don't say like how you're going to deal with that setup or anything like that, like you're still not going to win. And it seems really obvious, like I said, but I feel like people don't always do it.
Right. Well, that's it. I think we clocked an hour on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support the podcast, there are many ways you can do that. One of my favorites is hearing feedback, whether it be some production feedback if I'm messing something up on the technical side of things, or maybe it's a guest that you want to hear from, or maybe a topic that hasn't been covered yet that you'd really like to hear about as well. Anything like that, or maybe just some questions, whatever it is. Send me a comment on YouTube. Lots of people like to do that. Or perhaps what you can do is hit me up on Instagram as well. DDK Esports is my Instagram channel, and you can just send a DM there, and I'm pretty responsive typically. Now, if you want to go a step further, patreon.com/DDK Esports is how you can contribute financially to the growth of this podcast. And I think that really about covers it. So thank you very much for listening. I look forward to making the next podcast for you. Cheers.